Hi, friends. Today I'd like to talk about the change being within ourselves. In terms of what's going to happen globally or with the world and with humanity, we have to understand where the changes need to occur primarily. And most people think that we have to just go to legislation or we have to go to killing the adversaries or the predators. But the real work and the true work is about changing ourselves within. Right now, with everything going on with COVID and the riots and actually what the next steps are, the masks and the continued lockdown, it is obvious that we are a society that is at odds within itself, that we are at odds with the predatory mind, the adversaries that are in operation. We are at odds with each other, and we're at odds within ourselves. We're also at odds with the views of the world because we don't know what view we need to hold. Everything has been illusionary. We have been deluded and blinded and kept in the dark. So we don't even know fully or even partway what the truth is concerning the world that we're living in. So we're at odds with the opposition or the adversary. We're at odds with ourselves, and we're at odds with the views of this world. Meanwhile, we are contorting and shaping our mental landscapes in order to adjust to the insanities that are based on a desperation in our psyches, a desperation that we're experiencing concerning grief and fear and concern and trying to find solutions or just trying to avoid and deny. But we're also at odds and dealing with an insanity around an insatiable greed that's operating within the world. And that greed is turning the world into a dark crater of hopelessness and fear and death before actually dying. And I'd like to say something to that because what's happening right now with the eugenics that's being deployed and the depopulation, what's happening is death is becoming part of a concentrated focus inside this dark occult matrix that's going on. And so we are through the COVID, which would be considered a covert operation against humanity at this time, the riots and all bits and parts of the food chain, the upcoming vaccination, the vaccinations that we've already taken. I mean, there are all sorts of things that are going on right now that are applying and bringing forth the death matrix. So what I want to focus on, though, at this moment is to talk about this insatiable greed that is literally bringing us to the brink of this feeling of hopelessness and fear and forcing us into these living zombie-type deaths because of our focus being on things that aren't very important when you really think about it. So it is clear that we and the predatory mind are essentially brewing hatred in any way possible because of what is transpiring through all the agendas at play, okay? And the agendas at play are to create a disconnect and a divisiveness between all human beings. So whether it's by putting devices in our hands and then locking us in our homes so that we're only connecting through our devices, our computers, or by placing the mask on us or creating division by this separation of where we're standing in the stores or who can go in and shop, etc. But there are other ways that they are deploying divisiveness, which would be Black Lives Matter at this time, riots, trying to push the racism card again, but also they use and have been using for hundreds of years things like, of course, racism, color, gender, sexuality, and religion, and so on and so forth, to divide us and to help fracture not only our human relationships, but our minds as well. So they have used religion in order to prejudice us against one another, when ordinarily that would not be a problem between people, because people tend to be more accepting than we realize. But by placing a religious construct with certain value systems placed inside each construct, very rigid value systems, it pits people against one another, and it allows and creates actually an obsessive need for people to judge, to dominate, and truly to eliminate that which doesn't conform to our sense of rightness, which is always very individual. Therefore, our personal self-righteousness and intolerance is creating chaos and alarming levels of conflict now within the human populace. That would even go along with people who consider themselves truthers, operating and sharing information, truthing information or information about global issues, and pit them against people that aren't awake yet to what's really happening, haven't been diving down into the rabbit hole. So they call them sheep, and it's pitting and against, again, polarizing people at an extremely alarming rate. So religion and politics and so on and so forth are creating a much swifter and larger divide right now. So essentially, we could not be striving harder to actually ignite wars and feed this very sick hunger of greed that is not only driving the 1%, which is they are insatiable in the level of greed that generates a pursuit within them. But it is also our own mindset of materialism and things, particularly unimportant things, that has gotten to a place over the last 30 years, truly, of driving us, pushing us forward, claiming victory and judgment and separation and divide through the economic parts of our lives. We personally seem to need and desire and hunger and actually demand just too much. That's where we've gotten to. We've actually taken on the predatory mind within ourselves, because that's what they do. They are insatiable in their need, in their desire, in their dominance, and in their requirement of us to feed them. And we are doing the same thing within ourselves and with one another. We are indulgent and excessive, and we support corporate interests who rely on our self-interest and on our vanity, on our pride, on our insatiable greed, and mostly on our laziness, which is showing itself in apathy. You see, the thing is that people have gotten so utterly lazy, and we want so much of everything. We want to have beauty, and we want to have income, and we want to have the best sex, and we want to be stars. We want to have fame. We want to have fortune. But we don't want to have to work for anything. That's what the newer generations are being taught. They're being taught to be apathetic by the generations that are a little bit more advanced, because they too have conformed to apathy and inertia, believing that either you just work and you slave labor and you by that you get ahead, or you live by credit and debt so that you don't have to work and build yourself higher. You just take longer to pay everything off. It's really created an incredible laziness within the human mind. And we, the people, are living in extremes. And the very real lack of balance is going to be our greatest undoing because we're continuously polarized, right? It's never in the human mind, and we're trained this way. You either are doing it right or you are either doing it wrong. You are good or you are bad. It is light or it is dark. It is day or it is night. But we forget that there's so many parts of the in-between to look at. So this extremism of insatiable greed and hunger and control and power, which is really a lack of power, a feeling of powerlessness, and this lack of balance where we are believing in polarization will literally be our greatest undoing. Our extraordinary unwillingness to demand of ourselves changes necessary for planetary survival. And from there, we insist on corporate interest to seek other alternatives, as opposed to higher alternatives in order to provide just for simple basic needs. We continue to desire opulence, although we are in chronic survival. We still see the world through an illusion and desire opulence, when in truth, humanity really just has basic, simple needs that need to be provided for. But by our desire for opulence, we are insisting and pushing the corporate interest to create more, to feed our constant stream of needing new fulfillment of other desires. So in actuality, while we are living in planetary survival, we are continuing to starve our future of her very promise. So we, essentially, not them, are really the demise of our planet, although we don't want to be. It isn't Trump. It isn't Obama. It's not Clinton or Putin. It's just us. It's not the toxic and uncooperative psychopathic leadership. And although they're presenting everything and putting it into play, they got the ball rolling, but they had to pick up the ball and run it down the end zone for a touchdown. And that was us. We picked up the ball. We are led by the mirrors of our collective selves. We are. We are led by the counterbalances of what we say we desire, but it's our actions that speak the loudest, and by our very actions or inactions, our world is at the very place that it is. Now, if our actions, if our desire was for peace and harmony and balance and equity and so on and so forth, and then our actions fulfilled that desire by us thinking and speaking and behaving in such a way that created that peace and that joy and that harmony and that balance that we wanted, then our world would emulate it. It would become that. If all of us as the majority presented a collective vision, then the predatory mind, who's 1%, could not feed itself upon us or anything or any of the constructs it places upon us or within our lives or within the planet, because we would be unwilling to attend to it. We wouldn't be picking up the ball and running it down the end zone. A dark force of malice and malignancy is created out of our self-loathing, and it's created out of our absolute disrespect for ourselves and the earth and our atmosphere, and our own crippling repulsion for the truth. And really, most people have a repulsion for the truth because the illusion continues to satiate the immediacy. It continues to satiate the fear and keep it at bay. And our procrastination and our apathy towards any change happens consistently, particularly when discomfort is involved. You see, no one wants to ever step out of their comfort zone. If it means I live in my house with my bed and my clothing, and I'll die there, or I will move out to 3 towns away into this little tiny apartment, but I'll be safe, a lot of people won't even make the move. If it's to feed themselves, a lot of people won't put in the garden. People will not move out of their comfort zone to provide their own security and safety. And it's important that we do, because we are, in fact, leading our generations that are behind us, our children and our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. When we don't lead by example and to say it's okay to be uncomfortable, because when we do this, and we all do this together, a new fabric is woven and new comforts will come in. But we don't see past the immediate comfort that exists right now. So for such a religious and spiritual world, and I say that with quotes around it, So for such a religious and spiritual world, we live predominantly through our deadliest sins, the sins of the viruses that are planted within us that we've taken on and that we choose to live through. We live through them. And those sins sit quite situated within our mind. And they seek only for self-gratification. And they live in vehement opposition to all human virtues. And they live in vehement opposition to having strong characters that need to be designed from wisdom and from personal dignity. And one of the things that I will say when I look at a lot of selfies of the younger people, there's a very limited personal dignity. When everybody is so well made up and boobs are out of the shirts and the abs and the pants are hanging down on the guys, and we're just all about the physical attributes instead of about building wisdom. You can be beautiful, you can be sexual, but you can still become wise. Wisdom is an element that's is missing from this world today. And unfortunately, even in the elders being in their 90s and 80s and 70s and 60s and 50s a little bit, there's a very wellspring lack of wisdom going on. And what is being taught to the younger generations is permissiveness and lack of strategy and lack of solution. So when we talk about building a character, we talk about building a character that's designed from wisdom. That's what we're meant to be doing as we progress through our lives. And we're not doing that. So in order to change course, we really must look into ourselves. And when we look into ourselves, we can shift ourselves if we're honest. So we look at our thoughts, and we look at our needs, our true needs, our course of actions, and our connection to each other. And we look at that by how are we living, and how do we want to actualize our lives in a more valued way. So everything begins with thought. And then all thoughts move into some kind of emotion. And that emotion could be upset, it could be contentment, it could be anger, it could be pain, whatever. But a thought has to be it comes first, and then an emotion attaches and connects to that thought. And maybe based underneath that thought is a need, or it's a want, or it's a demand. And so based on what we're needing, wanting, or demanding, and the thoughts that we have around it connect to the emotions that we have from that, then we choose the course of action that we're going to take in order to have it or to complain that we don't have it, either way. So we're either going to go and do something about it, or we're going to sit inert and apathetic, complaining that the world didn't provide that for us, which a lot of people do. We have to be willing to shift our thoughts and where we're placing them, our focus. We need to shift ourselves out of just endless wants and endless desires into what are our functional needs, and then what's surrounding that bolsters and gives us quality of life. And then utilizing our emotions taking them and activating concrete actions that will support creative and productive and positive change. And we must focus on our connection to each other in a very valued way. And while we're sitting with our devices and all of these places within us that we have designed separation because we believe, we bought into it, we are not valuing our relationships or our connections with each other. Okay? So that's what we need to do. We need to place a higher priority, not only on thoughts, our needs, our emotions, and our actions, but on our connection with each other. We must sit down and strategize a plan and then fulfill that plan without hesitation, without waver, without allowing doubt or fear or procrastination to insert itself. We must have courage. We must be brave. And bravery and courage are two different things. Bravery is, in this moment, I'm taking this step, and I don't feel like I can do it. I don't believe in myself. Something's getting in my way. I'm feeling afraid for whatever reason. In the immediate moment, you take on and you become brave, and you face that singular moment. Courage is an overall umbrella of a bunch of brave moments. But you have the overall courage that you're going to make the changes within yourself. You're going to look within yourself. You're going to see all the places within you that are creating a better world, a higher world. And you decide that's what I'm going to do. So your courage is the decision. That's what you're going to do no matter what it takes. And the bravery is every step along the way. And we all must have a broad vision to endure an evolution, our evolution. And evolution means to evolve, to expand in consciousness, and to evolve ourselves forward, inward, upward, downward, in all ways, because you're expanding in all ways. So you just put yourself in the middle of the circle, and the circle just expands. That's evolution. And also involution. Involution means to be involved in oneself in such a way as to provide growth. Not involved in such a way of having selfies and thinking you're the most wonderful thing through ego. It's to be involved spiritually and through your heart space, through your emotional space, and actively in who you are and growing yourself much higher and much broader in a positive sense of these words. We talk about having a revolution, and revolution is to continue to revolve and repeat. So if you have an evolution inside of your revolution with the commitment and the intention, this is the last time that we have to go through the same door to get to the same place to move forward. So it's really more about evolution and involution than anything else. But when we have this courage and when we have broad vision, to endure the evolution going within and having our internal process, we will bring home ourselves to a place of peace and a long-term stability for the lives of everyone on earth. You see, when we do the work on ourselves, we are actually creating a chain reaction energetically. You know, it wasn't that suddenly 1 million or 2 million, how many people are waking up now? We all didn't suddenly do that. One person woke up to an idea. One person had an aha moment, and that person integrated it and shared it with another who thought, wow, that's very true and intriguing, and they had an aha moment. And it became a chain reaction or a ripple in the ocean. And suddenly that first person that had the aha moment now it's millions of people who are having aha moments, and they're sharing it together. So you see, when we do our inner work, we're actually creating the ripple effect that flows through the ocean, touching all other beings, whether they notice it or not. And at a certain point, when their consciousness is ready to awaken, they'll have their aha moment, and they'll begin to have their journey. So people say to me, well, I don't know what my purpose is. Do you know what my purpose is? Everyone's purpose right now is to do the inner work, is to do the change within. Okay? So what is happening is as we are evolving and evolving through ourselves, through expansion, we're able to bring home ourselves to peace, and we're able to create a long-term stability. And when we're able to do that within ourselves, then we're able to do that in the collective whole, because all the collective whole will be touched. And that purpose must begin now. And not only begin now, but it must maintain itself throughout always, because it's about continuing to expand. The reality is that there are very few tomorrows guaranteed to any of us, honestly. And until our inner work is done in each of us, our leaders will carry on as is. And wars will continue. Oil will continue its advancement. Technology and profiteering is going to continue its advancement. And having rulership and control over the people and over everything on this earth will continue to advance. It will continue to be the driving force, and it will be up to our own peril, because we did not choose it. And the truth is, it's all about us. I remember there was a time 19 years ago when I was critically ill and I was dying, and there was a moment when I was passing away. And all of these beings were flying around me, begging me to not pass away. And I so wanted to. I was suffering. And this older being presented himself in front of me and told me it was not my time, and it was not my time to come, and that I had a larger purpose. I needed to go back. And I said, well, I'm really suffering. I did not try to commit suicide. It just was the process. And I said, I'm really suffering. I can't suffer at this level anymore. This has been a long time, and now my body's really suffering. And I can't do it. I need help. And I've been praying every day, and I pray all night, nonstop. And what's happened when I said that, I said, and God didn't answer me. No one's answered me. I'm still suffering. And he said to me, everything that all of you require, all humans require on that planet, exists within your world on your planet. So if you're ill, there is medicine or herbs or food. If you are lonely, there are other people to love you. Whatever you are missing, the earth and the realm that the earth exists within has great and ample supply. But you must turn to each other. Every one of you has been born with skills and tools and talents and gifts and all sorts of things to bring to the table that assist and help other people. There is somebody in your world that will help you, but you need to look inside your world, because God is not here to save anybody. It's on each of you to save each other. And obviously I did survive. And I'm here to tell you that that was absolute 100% truth. So the reality is, what is going on with this world is on us. It's always been on us. And that's why the apathy and the inertia and the procrastination and the laziness and the fear is going to be our ultimate undoing if we don't put a stop to it inside of ourselves. So I, for one, am absolutely beyond ashamed of us all for choosing our greed and our comfort over doing any effort to create peace and a future home for our own children. And I must admit that I do struggle with depression anymore, because I'm struggling to get past my disappointment in humanity and humanity around the globe, and humanity most especially in Western civilization, when we've had so much and been given so much, and we still can't stop wanting more. I'm sure that people will defend themselves and say, but. But let me just say this. Every time that there's a defense, anytime somebody leads off with defending their position, they're starting a battle. They're buying into the battle paradigm. We don't need to defend. What we need to do is understand. We need to understand ourselves. We need to understand others. We need to just listen and gravitate to the places where we can have empathy and compassion and agreement. But defending ourselves comes because we're all traumatized. And our trauma is making each other battle each other. So we must stop that. And we must stop defending our colored skin and our religion and our thoughts and our choices and our countries and our maybe even our continents or our government officials or whatever. Because the truth really stands as this. We are all in this together. And we are all a part of the problem. And therefore, that creates the idea that we can all be part of the solution. But we must come to the table to be the solution, bring forward our part in the solution. And every one of us has a part in the solution. So I invite each of you that are listening to me right now and to bring in your partners and your parents and your children and your better friends. Write these questions down and ask yourself and everybody else that I just named, people even on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, whatever. Ask a few questions. This is the first one. First question is, what am I? What am I willing to change today that will support humanity, our earth, and our children's future? What am I willing to change today that will support humanity, our earth, and our children's future? You write that down, and you write down your answers. But you write down your answers with true contemplation, not just immediacy, unless you've already asked that question and you know. So again, number one, what am I willing to change today that will support humanity, our earth, and our children's future? Number two, what will I be willing to change next week and the week after and the one after that continuously? Wow. So that means that we don't take responsibility just for today. We choose to take responsibility for the whole of our lives. So the question number two is, what will I be willing to change next week and the week after and the one after that continuously? Question number three, how can I leave as little of a footprint on this earth as I can while expanding my conscious awareness until I am filled and whole with kindness and with truth and with love consciousness? How can I leave as little of a footprint on this earth as I can while expanding my conscious awareness to bring forward more kindness, more peace, more joy, more life, more love, more laughter, and everything else that is so beautiful today and every day hereafter? That's question number three. What we are really needing to do, what is the requirement of the higher goal, of the broader vision, and of courage, is that we go within. We go within our own hearts, and our hearts need to be wide open. They do. And that's very hard to do when society is so broken. But we need to go in our hearts, help them to open up, fill them with excitement and joy and wonder and awe, and a drive for true, authentic, internal prosperity. And I'm not talking prosperity of money. I'm talking about prosperity of love and wonder and joy and excitement, abundance, peace, and stability. And create through loving ourselves an invitation for the larger changes that we need to make. And we begin the journey towards freedom and healing of self and of loved ones and all of humanity in our world. So if we can just be within ourselves like a present observer, not so much so fully into the external world anymore, but to be within, our hearts wide open, observing and filling up with laughter and joy and all the good and wonderful things, bringing forward our true authenticity, creating through a loving self-exchange, larger change within ourselves and then the world. And we begin the journey towards this freedom, this healing of self. And through the ripple effect, we will affect our loved ones and all of humanity and all of the world at large. When our world changes, they rest within our unification. But first, that unification has to come with ourselves. We have to unify with our body and take good care of it. We have to unify with our emotions, and we have to take good care of our feelings and our heart space. We have to unify with our thoughts and manage them and understand them and keep them more pure. And we have to merge and unify with our souls, that part of ourselves that we have pretty much left behind. And then we unify. Once we start unifying with our whole selves, we unify with all others. And we unify with the whole of nature. And we walk intimately with loving awareness to all that exists and all that is. And it's step-by-step committed effort with unification with self and all that there is. And what will happen is the world will begin to change. This is how we heal our planet. This is how we heal the world. This is actually how we become the greater version of ourselves. This is how we actually model a more blissed future for our children and our children's children. And this is how the dark forces against change devolve into history, no longer having power or influence over our lives, because what we did is we took command of our lives. We take responsibility for ourselves and all that we are. And I will say to you that not every thought is our thought. Our thoughts can also come from the predatory mind, and our thoughts can come from the collective whole. And the more empathic, the more sensitive you are, the more you will gather collective thoughts and then think that they're your own. When I say that you go within yourself and you are the observer rather than the reactor, as the observer, you can notice, oh, that's the thought that I would have. That one is mine. This ugly one over here, that's not something that's normal to me. I'm going to throw that away. Let it go. Don't attach to it. Let it go. It's the same with our emotions, particularly with the 5G coming in, the HARP systems and the DARPA systems and all of the systems at play, and our phones and our devices where energy and thought come through and touch our emotional space with the chemicals that we actually use really trigger our emotions. We have to understand that not all of our emotions are our own. So we have to identify which ones are ours. Okay, this person just did that. I feel hurt by that. And then begin to notice why you feel hurt and choose to rise beyond that hurt, because sitting in that hurt only feeds the predatory mind. The reason why the predatory mind is creating such a state of chaos and drama and insanity is to, A, keep us very, very confused and unstable. They want to keep us very disoriented. But at the same time, while we're confused in our minds and we're drifting very much around all these different things, our emotions are running all over the place. And we're feeling a lot of grief and depression and sadness and sorrow and fear and concern and worry and all sorts of things that we're getting caught up in, and that just feeds the predatory mind. It loves to feed off of our suffering. I find it very ironic in the Buddhist spiritual movement, which I'm very well researched on, so I don't need people to tell me about it, but the Four Noble Truths are all about suffering. And it's to take us to the eight processes of not suffering and so on and so forth. But the reality is Buddhism really talks about our suffering. And it sets things in our mind, these ideas in our mind, that that's all we're meant to do, is to suffer and suffer and suffer. Well, of course, the Christians and the Muslims and the Jews and everybody else, they speak of that too in their different ways. But I find it mind-boggling that a spiritual movement focuses so much on suffering in order to move beyond it. The reality is, the moving beyond it is just not attaching to it. Letting go and not connecting so deeply with the suffering. Learn from it, grow from it, take from it, become a bigger and better version of yourself from it. But what people mostly do is wallow in their suffering and then claim that's who they are. And so our task is to let that go, to do everything in our power. In this moment, you can cry. In this moment, you can feel angry. And that's what I want to say. I've never, ever, the person says, please don't feel your emotions. In fact, it's the fact that we've been taught not to feel our emotions that has caused so many problems within our health and our mind and our emotional body. We're so disoriented. But what I am saying is, if you're feeling anger, feel the anger and then move on. The truth of the matter is, emotions don't last that long. The better emotions do, but even they don't last that long. So based on thought, based on feeling, based on discomfort or comfort or what somebody says or something that happens, our emotions are always in flux. They're always changing. And so one moment you can feel absolutely filled with joy. The next moment somebody can trigger and say something, you go, wow, that wasn't very nice. That kind of hurt me. And you can feel hurt and sadness. But then process it and move on. Let it go. Don't reattach to it. Don't think about it again. Just move forward. And that way you're beginning to move in a very healthy mental landscape. So we have to, again, recognize what are our thoughts. If there are thoughts and they're not happy, they're not positive, that's okay. Just don't attach to it. If you have feelings that aren't happy, that's okay. We have feelings for a reason. Just don't attach to it. And because of the 5G and because of our devices, it's actually radiation and chemicals that's causing all the ADD. And I have always been proud of myself. I don't have ADD. But now I notice that I do. The more time I've spent on a device is when I started to have it. So what we need to do is, we need to stop using our chemicals, which is another conversation we won't have today. We need to understand radiation and stop using our devices so much, which is not something I want to talk about today. But what we want to do is we want to stop drifting, having our minds drift from here to here to here to here, bouncing all over the place. Because what happens is that when our minds are drifting, the negative energy or the predatory mind, that's when they slip into our thought process, and then into our emotional body and into our physical body. And they begin to snatch our souls. The more we drift, the easier it is for them to come into us. So what we want to do is we want to balance our thoughts. And when our minds get too hyperactive, we need to go in and do practices, whatever that is. If it's meditation, if it's just going in the garden and letting things go, doing artwork, playing a song, whatever it is for each person. But our drifting needs to stop. There's where we need to get the handle, because we don't want them to grab a hold of our minds and turn them into the predatory mind. That's very important. So again, manage your thoughts, know what is yours, don't attach to that which isn't. Manage your emotions, don't worry about it, just notice and move forward, no attaching to it, and keep your mind from drifting and call your spirit forward. All the work that needs to happen within the change of this world comes from within us, period. And when we do it on an individual basis, and it comes together with collective energies and beings that are actually doing this, then things begin to change automatically. And I want to say this before I go. is that it isn't only just the humans that we need to be concerned about. Animals and also all of nature, like our trees, all of the flora in the world, the earth herself, is all sentient and conscious. All animals have the great capacity to feel emotion and feel pain and have thoughts. And their thoughts are the way they are developed. However, they do have thoughts. And they have thoughts through their consciousness. The struggle is they don't have words. They don't have human language. They have their language dependent on their species. But they do have language. They do have social structures. They do have families. They do experience grief. They do experience loss. They do experience pain. They do feel anger. They feel fear. And they absolutely experience love. And trees and all of flora also have consciousness. Why? Because the earth has consciousness. She is alive. She has feelings. She has thoughts. She has consciousness. That's how we have it. Okay? This is not exclusive to humanity. Humans tend to think that it's only us. And again, there's narcissism. But it is not. It is all of nature. And so when we're working and going inside of ourselves to create the changes that are vital, we want to include the ripple effect that all humans and all of nature and the mother herself is also supported by the changes that we make within ourselves and heal ourselves. We want the ripple effect to affect all of sentient life, because it's not just us under attack. It's all of life that's under attack from the predatory mind. So anyways, as I close, I just want to say, again, it is up to us, and there is no other time but now. Now is all we have, and our future is looking shorter and shorter and shorter. And so every day, it's most important to go within and start doing the real work, focusing within ourselves and less on what they're doing, because everything that we focus on becomes a creation. And if we continue to focus on their creation, we are only amplifying it. We are the tuner, and we need to stop. Remember the 3 questions that I asked earlier. Please go back if you didn't get them all and write them down, and please answer those questions for yourself and for all the loved ones around you, and then hopefully for the world. And I thank you for sitting with me today and listening to me. I hope that you have a wonderful, blissful rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.